The content presented on Truly Woke is created for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes. Welcome to Truly Woke.
Imagine waking up one morning, walking into an ordinary building, smiling at people you've never met, thinking you're about to participate in a simple psychology study. Nothing dangerous, nothing life-changing, just another experiment. But within days, those same ordinary people would begin shouting, humiliating, and controlling each other. Some would break down emotionally. Others would enjoy having power far more than anyone expected. And one question would leave the scientific world deeply divided. What happens when ordinary people are given extraordinary power? Was this experiment a glimpse into the darkest corners of human nature? Or did it reveal something even more unsettling? That the situation itself, not the people, can transform behavior in ways we rarely imagine. This is the story of one of the most famous and most controversial psychology experiments ever conducted. A study that influenced classrooms, movies, leadership training, and public discussions around the world. But decades later, another mystery emerged. What if the story we've all heard isn't the complete story? Stay with us until the end, because the truth behind this experiment is more complex than most people realize. The year was 1971. The world was changing rapidly. Protests filled the streets. Governments faced growing public distrust. Psychologists were asking difficult questions about obedience, authority, and the influence of social roles. Just a few years earlier, another famous study had suggested that many ordinary people would obey authority figures, even when it meant harming someone else. Researchers wanted to understand something different, not just why people obey, but how environments and roles might shape who we become. Could a peaceful person become aggressive simply by being placed in a position of power? Could a confident person lose hope simply because others treated them as powerless? These questions weren't just academic. History had already shown examples of ordinary individuals participating in cruelty during wars and under oppressive systems. Scientists wanted to know whether human behavior was driven mostly by personality, or whether situations could reshape almost anyone. To explore this, a psychologist at Stanford University designed a bold study. The idea sounded surprisingly simple. Gather healthy volunteers. Assign some to act as guards. Assign others to act as prisoners. Create a simulated prison. Then observe what happens. On paper, it looked like a straightforward psychological experiment. No one expected the events that would soon unfold to become one of the most debated studies in modern psychology. The researchers carefully recruited volunteers. The participants weren't criminals. They weren't soldiers. They weren't people with violent histories. They were ordinary young adults who answered an advertisement offering payment for taking part in a study. Before the experiment began, they went through screening designed to exclude individuals with serious psychological or medical problems. They appeared healthy, normal, average, exactly the kind of people researchers wanted. Because if dramatic changes happened, it couldn't easily be explained by saying, they were unusual people to begin with, or so it seemed. The participants had no idea that the roles they were about to receive would become one of the most famous and disputed chapters in psychology. Then came the moment that changed everything. With the flip of a coin, some became guards, others became prisoners. A random assignment. Nothing more. Or was it? Because from that moment onward, the way people saw themselves and each other began to change, and no one could predict how far those changes might go. In the next chapter, the simulated prison opens its doors. The guards put on their uniforms. The prisoners lose their names. And what begins as a controlled experiment starts moving in a direction that surprises nearly everyone involved. The morning had finally arrived. There were no prison walls stretching into the distance, no towering guard towers, no barbed wire fences. Instead, beneath a university building, a basement had been transformed into something that looked remarkably convincing. Small cells, steel bars, locked doors, dim lighting, narrow hallways. Every detail was designed to make the environment feel real, because the researchers believed that if people accepted their roles, their behavior might change naturally. And that was exactly what they wanted to observe. The volunteers who had been assigned as guards arrived first. They were given matching uniforms. Reflective sunglasses hid their eyes, making it harder for others to read their emotions. Each carried a whistle and a wooden baton, not intended as a weapon, but as a visible symbol of authority. The instructions seemed simple. Maintain order. Keep the prison running. Avoid physical violence. Beyond that, how they enforced the rules was largely left to their own judgment. At first, it didn't seem unusual. Some laughed. Some joked with one another. A few looked uncomfortable. After all, they knew this wasn't a real prison. It was only an experiment. Or so they believed. Meanwhile, the volunteers assigned as prisoners were brought into the mock prison. Instead of being called by their names, they were identified by numbers. A small change, but a powerful one. Think about it. Your name is one of the first things that defines who you are. When someone stops calling you by your name, it can begin to feel as though part of your identity has been taken away. One by one, the participants stepped into their new environment. Some laughed nervously. Others looked around with curiosity. No one imagined how emotionally intense the coming days would become. For a while, everything seemed calm. The guards introduced routines. The prisoners followed instructions. The atmosphere was awkward, but manageable. Then something unexpected happened. As the hours passed, the volunteers slowly stopped acting. Conversations changed. Body language changed. Small decisions became more serious. Some guards began speaking with increasing confidence. Some prisoners became quieter. It wasn't because anyone had told them to behave this way. It happened gradually, almost invisibly. The situation itself seemed to be influencing their actions, and that idea fascinated the researchers. By the end of the first day, the atmosphere no longer felt like a college project. The guards had started inventing additional rules. Some became stricter than anyone expected. Some prisoners began questioning those rules. Others simply obeyed. Not because they had to, but because the environment made resistance feel more difficult. This wasn't yet chaos, but something had changed. The line between pretending and believing had started to blur. Now, it's important to remember something. Many psychologists today argue that later accounts of this experiment raised serious questions. Some historians and researchers believe that participants may have been influenced by the expectations of the study, and that the famous story is more complicated than it first appeared. That debate continues even today. But regardless of where people stand, the events that followed sparked conversations about power, identity, and human behavior that continue around the world. As night fell, the basement grew quiet, but beneath that silence, pressure was building. The next morning, the experiment would take a dramatic turn. Simple disagreements would become open conflict. The guards would face a choice. The prisoners would face another. And the entire study would begin moving toward the moment that made it famous. The sun rose on the second day. But inside the basement, there was no sunrise, no fresh air, no reminder that the outside world even existed. Only cold concrete walls, locked doors, and the growing weight of the roles everyone had begun to accept. Something had changed overnight. The volunteers no longer looked like college students taking part in a psychology study. The guards walked with more confidence. The prisoners moved more cautiously. The atmosphere had become tense. And then, everything exploded. One group of prisoners decided they had had enough. They refused to follow instructions. They ignored orders. They pushed furniture against the cell doors. Some shouted. Others demanded to be treated with more respect. It was the experiment's first real challenge. The guards hadn't planned for this. There was no instruction manual telling them exactly what to do. For a brief moment, they hesitated. Then they acted. Working together, they removed the barricades, restored order, and separated some prisoners from the others. The rebellion ended. But something more important had happened. The guards had discovered that they could exercise authority. And once people realize they have power, the temptation to use it can grow. Here's where the story becomes fascinating. No one had ordered the guards to become harsh. No one had handed them a script. Yet some began enforcing rules more aggressively than before. Others remained relatively calm. This difference matters. It reminds us that people don't all react to the same situation in the same way. Some embrace authority. Some question it. Some resist it. Even within the same environment. That's one reason this experiment still sparks debate today. It wasn't simply about whether people become cruel. It was about how different individuals respond to the same pressures. The prisoners changed, too. At first, many had laughed about their assigned numbers. Now, they answered to them almost automatically. Some became quieter. Some appeared increasingly stressed. Others tried to avoid drawing attention. Imagine spending day after day in an environment where every action is controlled by someone else. Even if you know it's temporary, the emotional pressure can build. The study was beginning to show how powerful social situations can feel. Behind the scenes, the research team observed everything. Every conversation, every disagreement, every change in behavior. At first, what they saw seemed to support their original question. Can roles and environments influence human behavior? But as the days passed, the line between observing and participating became less clear. Some critics later argued that the researchers themselves became too involved in the simulated prison. That criticism would become one of the biggest controversies surrounding the study. Today, many psychologists agree that this is one reason the experiment should be interpreted with caution. Its influence was enormous, but so were the questions raised about its methods. Now ask yourself, if you were placed in that basement, given a uniform, a badge, and authority over strangers, would you remain exactly the same person? Or would the environment slowly begin changing you, without you even realizing it? Most of us like to believe we know the answer. But human behavior is often more unpredictable than we think. As the experiment continued, the emotional strain grew stronger. Some participants wanted to leave. Others became more deeply absorbed in their roles. And the researchers faced an unexpected problem. This was no longer just an interesting study. It was becoming a serious ethical challenge. It was supposed to last 2 weeks, 14 days. That was the plan. The researchers expected disagreements, stress, and perhaps a few arguments. What they did not expect was how quickly the atmosphere would become emotionally overwhelming for some participants. As the days passed, several prisoners appeared increasingly distressed. Some showed signs of anxiety and emotional exhaustion. The tension inside the simulated prison continued to rise. For the research team, an uncomfortable question emerged. At what point does observing human behavior become more important than protecting the people taking part? Outside the basement, life continued as normal. Students attended classes. People walked across campus. Most had no idea what was happening below them. Inside the experiment, however, the environment had become deeply immersive. Some participants seemed to stop thinking of themselves as volunteers in a study. Instead, they reacted as though the prison setting were emotionally real. Whether this happened because of the roles, the environment, individual personalities, or a combination of all three remains a subject of debate. But one thing became clear. The emotional impact on some participants was significant. Then someone who hadn't been deeply involved in running the study visited the simulated prison. They looked around, watched the interactions, observed the atmosphere, and asked a simple but powerful question. Why is this still continuing? Sometimes it takes an outsider to notice something that those inside have slowly become accustomed to. That moment forced the research team to reconsider everything. Instead of lasting 14 days, the experiment was stopped after just 6, not because the researchers had collected all the data they wanted, but because concerns about the participants' well-being had become too important to ignore. That decision marked a turning point in psychology. The study became one of the most discussed examples of why ethical safeguards are essential in human research. Today, psychological studies involving people are reviewed much more carefully to help protect participants from unnecessary harm. For years, many people saw this experiment as proof that ordinary individuals can become harsh simply because of the roles they are given. But over time, researchers looked more closely at what had happened. Some questioned whether participants may have been influenced by what they believed the researchers expected. Others argued that the researchers' own involvement may have shaped the outcome. Still, others pointed out that not every guard behaved the same way, and not every prisoner responded identically. These criticisms don't erase the study's historical importance. Instead, they remind us that science is always evolving. Even famous experiments can be re-examined, challenged, and understood in new ways as more evidence emerges. Perhaps the most enduring lesson isn't that every ordinary person becomes cruel when given power. It's that situations, expectations, authority, and group dynamics can influence behavior far more than we often realize. Understanding that influence helps us build better institutions, better workplaces, and fairer systems, while remembering that individuals still make choices within those environments. So, did this experiment reveal the darkest side of human nature? Or did it reveal how carefully we must interpret scientific findings? Maybe the real answer lies somewhere in between. Because understanding human behavior is rarely simple, and perhaps that's the greatest mystery of all. If this story made you question what shapes human behavior, you're not alone. Some of psychology's most fascinating questions still don't have simple answers. On this channel, we explore the mysteries of history, science, and the human mind, one story at a time. If you enjoy thought-provoking documentaries, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next journey into the unknown.